Hello folks, Matthew Peterson here, trainer at Pragmatic Works. If this is your first time to the channel, make sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all the videos, all the live webinars that we do, and also take a look in the comments and description below to see some of the other activities and training sessions that we have available for you. So in this video, what I want to show you is, have you ever had a Canvas app where your user or you as the developer want to give your users the ability to both search over the data and put a filter on the data? Now, in order to do that with the Canvas apps, we're going to have to do a few different things. One, we're going to have to write some PowerFX language. And two, we're going to have to give our users controls to activate the filtering criteria and to be able to put in their search criteria. So if this is something you've been wanting to learn how to do, stay tuned and let's see how we can get it done. Alright, so in this application I have a very simple gallery here hooked into a table, and what I'm showing in this gallery, for one of my labels I'm pointing to both my first name and my last name columns of my patient table, and then for my other label I'm pointing into my gender column. So the first thing I want to show is how can my users be able to filter just on a gender data value. So a few different ways of doing it, but what I'm going to show here is by giving my users access to a drop-down control. So I'm going to come up to my insert ribbon and I'm going to search for a drop-down control. And I'm going to put this drop-down up here. We're not going to make it look super picture perfect pretty today, just so that you don't have to watch too much of me doing all the design ideas here. So now that I have a drop-down, I'm going to rename this drop-down to DRP gender. So now one of the issues right away with the drop-down is they're going to put some sample data in here, 1, 2, and 3. Well, that's not really what I want to hook this into. I want to hook it into my gender column. So what I can do is I can select that drop-down control, and then over in the properties panel, I can hook it into one of my tables, which I have one called nursing patient, and then I can choose the column I want to use. I say, hey, I want to use the columns from gender. So that seems like it's great, but it's not great for this instance because I'll show you why. When I hit my play button, notice when I hit the drop down, I get every single record in this table and every single value for the gender for each of my records. Well, because there are only different ones that I want to use, I really just want the unique values. Sometimes you want all of them in there, but in this case, I just want the unique values. So I'm going to have to do a little bit more modification here. So here's how it's going to get done. I'm going to go to my drop down and I'm going to modify the items here, but I'm going to use a PowerFX language to do it. And the language and the formula that I'm going to use is the formula called distinct. What distinct will do is it'll only return a list of unique values from the column expression that you have put in. So I'm going to say, hey, I want to look at my nursing patient table, comma, and then what column do I want to use? I want to use my gender column. And so that's all I have to do. I put in distinct, the name of my data source, and then the name of my column. So now when I hit play here, and I come on over, bingo, I've got M and F, which is great to get us started. But I'm just going to kind of give you something that we're not going to like here to save us some time. What if you want your users to be able to filter for male, filter for female, but you also want them to be able to see all the records at once? Well, if I were to go and write my filter condition right now, every time the app loads, it's going to filter down to just the male records, and then they can flip it over to female. But they don't have the opportunity to flip it or to say by default, I want to see all of the records. So if you want to make sure there's a constant filter, you're kind of done. You can go right to my filter statement here in about 2 minutes. But if you do want to give your users the ability to see a full view of the data, there's a few little extra steps that we're going to take here. So those extra steps that we're going to take are going to be done over in our properties panel. So I'm going to close out of my preview here. And when I click on my drop-down control, I'm going to head on over to my properties panel and I'm going to go into the advanced section. And in the advanced section, there are a few different things that I'm going to want to modify. First, the default. So right now they're saying the default is going to be the first record in the drop-down control. Well, I don't want there to be a default first record selected. So that's the first thing I'm going to do, is I'm going to wipe out the default value. Then the next thing for me is I want to modify this allow empty selection. I do want the users to not have to select one of the values in the drop-down control. So I have to let it know that yes, it is okay to have an empty selection. So I'm going to set this to true. All right, by default it said no, but now we're saying yes, you can have an empty selection. And then finally, the last thing I want to be able to do is give my users the ability to reset this control, to put it back into its default behavior. By default, you don't have that. It's set to false. But I do want my users to be able to reset the control. So I'm going to set this to true. So the three little things that I changed there, or maybe not little, is we changed the default to allow nothing. We said, yes, you can have an empty selection. And yes, we are going to allow our users to reset this control. So now that I have that part set up, now we can move on to the next step of the process. So the next step of the process is being able to do the filter criteria. So I'm going to come on over into my gallery, and I'm going to go to my items property here. And what I want to say is, okay, great. Yes, I'm seeing the nursing patient, but I want to be able to filter the nursing patient records. So in front of my items property in the formula window, I'm going to come up here to the top and I'm going to write in the filter command. The filter command says, okay, tell me what you want to filter over. In this case, it is the records from nursing patient that are inside of this gallery. Then I'm going to put in a comma, and then I'm going to say, well, what column do I want to filter over? Well, in my case, it's the gender column. And now I have to say, well, what should the gender equal? What value do I need to look for in the gender column for your filtering? So I'm going to say, look for the value that the user selects from this drop-down control. So I'm going to put in DRP gender, because that's the name of my drop-down control, dot, what do I want to reference from that drop-down control? I want to reference the selected record that we have given them. And then from that selected record, I need to use the value from that selected record. And then I'll close this off. And as you can see right now, just by putting that part in, there is nothing that the user sees because I allowed for that empty selection. I set the default to nothing. So currently we don't see any records here. But if I flip this to male, yes, now we can see males. If I flip it to female, yes, now I can see females. But, how are they going to get rid of M or F and go back to the default? So we're going to satisfy two different things here. One, we're going to make it to where if there's nothing selected, we see all of the records. And two, I need to give my user something to click in order to reset that control to get back to that empty selection. So those are the two things that we're going to solve here next. So let's get it done. So the first thing I'm going to do is close out of my preview here. Once I've closed out of my preview, there's a few different ways to do this. I could put just a nice little icon right here next to the drop-down control and say, hey, when you click this icon, we're going to reset the control for you. I am going to make it look a little bit nicer here and a little bit more dynamic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert an icon. And the icon that I'm going to choose here today, it can be anything that we want it to be. But I'm going to come on down here and let's find something that looks pretty good. So I think I got one that's called our reset in here. It kind of looks like a reset or a redo. I'll go with the reset icon. Again, it does not have to be a reset icon in order to do resetting, but that's the one that I'm going to choose today. And I'm going to click on it, rename it ICN reset DRP gender. And then I'm just going to move this icon and I'm going to try to get it fairly similar to right on the little drop-down control. And you might say, Matt, that's looking awful because now you're seeing two different icons, which is true, but I'm going to show you how to make this dynamic. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make that background of my icon the same color as the background of the drop-down arrow. So I'm going to come on over here and choose that default blue. And then I'm also going to change the text of it, the text color, so to speak. I'm going to change that to white. All right, so now it's looking a little bit better, but you're saying, well, where is the dropdown? How are they going to access one or the other? Which is a great question. So here's how that's going to be done. I'm going to go to its visible property. And on the visible property of this icon, it's currently set to true. But if I were to set it to false, we'll now see that we do not see the icon. So my idea here is I only want to show that reset icon if they have something selected, like M or F. If they don't, and it's at that empty selection of nothing, then I don't want this reset control to show. And then we'll add the action to this reset control. So let's see how we do this. Well, the way we're going to do it is we're going to write a logical statement here for the visibility. So one of our statements is called is blank. And what is blank will do is it will look for a control and see, is it currently blank? So I want to say, well, okay, look at my drop-down gender, look at the selected record, and then bring back the value of that record and see if that is currently blank. So right now, this is currently returning, right here, is blank. This is currently returning a false, which is why I currently do not see this icon. So because I'm putting this visibility on the icon control, because it's returning false, I don't see it. Well, actually, I do want to see it. So I want to actually do the exact opposite of this formula I've written in. So one easy way to do that is anytime you have a logical statement and you want the opposite value returned, all you have to do is put an exclamation point in front. And when you put that in front, it returns the opposite. So now, as mentioned, is blank is currently returning false, but then the bang is going in front of it, the exclamation point, and then that is now returning a true. And so now what do we see? We actually see the icon, which is perfect. That's how I want it to be. Now I just got to figure out what should the icon do once my user selects it. So I'm going to go to the icon and I'm going to move to its onSelect property. And on selection, I want to reset this control to go back to its default behavior, which was an empty selections are allowed, and the default was set to nothing selected. So I'm going to write in my formula here, reset, and then the name of my control, which is DRP gender. All right, I'm going to do a save here so I don't lose my work. So now that I've done a reset of DRP gender, when I hit play, so I've got female, I click the button, boom, or I click the icon, it now goes back to the default of nothing because we reset the control. Again, I don't see the data. We're going to fix that in a second. But again, if I hit here and I go F, filter's working, close it out, and we're almost there. We're almost completed with this filter. So now on to our last step here. So my last step is saying, okay, when we are filtering, I want to be able to see all the values if we don't have anything selected in the dropdown. Now there's a few ways to do that. I could do an if statement using some is blank. So if nothing is selected, show all the values. If something is selected, then honor the dropdown. But there's actually an easier way here. So instead of doing all that extra logical function work, I'm going to get rid of this dot. I'm going to get rid of my parentheses at the end. And I'm going to put in an or condition. And the way to do that nice and quick is just putting your double pipe delimiter. And then from here, I am going to go back to an is blank. So what I'm going to do is blank. I'm going to select what is blank, my DRP gender, and then dot selected. So dot selected, I'll zoom out here. And then finally dot value. And then I'll close that off and then close this off. And notice what now happened. The immediate point of when I put in this is blank, I'm now getting all the values. Well, why is that? Well, what's happening here is this is blank is returning currently right now a true because I don't have anything selected in my dropdown. And so whenever you write a filter statement, if one of your conditions in the filter statement is set to true, the filter statement just says, oh, I'm going to return all of your values for you. So now this filter statement can do two different things because we have this or statement in. It will look to see, hey, I'll filter on that drop-down selection, or if there's a true, I'm going to return each and every single thing to you. So now we have it working picture perfect in terms of letting our users be able to filter on a certain selection of a column value, and if they don't choose a value, they see every single record. So again, to prove it, I'll go M for male, see all M's, I hit my reset button, and now I see all of my records here again. And it looks pretty seamless here, right? You might want to make that a little bit better, but hopefully you get the idea. So now we have our filtering in place. But what if we want to also allow our users to filter down the data And then after it's filtered down, we want them to be able to put in some search criteria. So we want to combine both of these actions together. Well, let's get that part done. So to do a search here, we're going to give our users a place to type in their search criteria. So I'm going to come up here to my insert ribbon, and we are going to put in a text input. And I'm just going to move this text input over here to the side. And I'm going to give it a better name, something like INP search patient. So once I have that in, a few things to note about searching. Typically, whenever I have a virtual mentoring session, which is a thing that we do here at Pragmatic Works, where we help people with their app problems, we help them fix them. Normally, if I get one of those sessions that says, Matt, I've tried to search and it's just not working, typically there's one main reason why it doesn't work, and it's the reason that it never worked for me when I first started learning Power Apps, because I always forgot to do it. So let me make sure you know that trick here as well. The first thing you want to do when putting in a place for the users to search is you want to take out your default text. Because if you leave text input in, when we wire up search, it's going to look for a value on your data called text input, which you most likely do not have inside any of your columns. So you want to remove the text input for the default. We want no default. Now we can put in hint text. So let them know what this is for. Search for patient. And then we see that we have the hint text here. Now that we have the default set to nothing, we put in some hint text. Now we're ready to come on over and put in the search criteria. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to make my formula a little bit easier to read. I'm going to format it here. So I want to be able to search over all of the filtered records. So this is why I'm going to put my search command in front of my filter command. So I'm going to say I would like to search, open parentheses. So search says, please tell me the source to search over. Well, in our case, we want to search over all of the filtered records. So we have the data source already defined. So now we just go to the easy part. So we now go to our comma to say, well, where is the search text coming from? Well, in my case, it's coming from that input bar or that input control. So I'm going to say INP search patient. And that says, okay, well, that's a control. What value do you want me to reference from that control, or what property? So I'm going to say dot text. So look at the text, which is great because that's what it needed to be returned. Then I can move to the next step and say, okay, well, what columns do I want to search over? And you can have multiple columns here. So I'm going to say I want to be able to search based on the first name, comma, and I want to be able to search over the last name. And then I close this out. So now watch what happens here that we have the whole thing set up in place. When I hit play, I don't have any filters currently, and if I type in an R, I get anyone with the letter R. 2 R's, I only get Andy Warren. All right, I'll get rid of that. Does that work as well if I do a filter? So let me filter down to females, and I'll put an L in. So now we get Camille, Allison, Mary. I'll put 2 L's in. Now only Camille and Allison, 2 L's in an I. And now I only get Allison here. So hopefully what you saw here is that there's a few ways that you can do searching and filtering. These are just 2 of the ways, but it's one of the common questions I'll get from my attendees in my App in a Day sessions. Can I search and be also able to filter? And this is one way to execute it. So hopefully you enjoyed. If there's anything that we can help you out with for your Power Apps learning or Power Platform learning, please look at the description below and feel free to contact us because we would love to be a partner with you. So hopefully, again, you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.